So, again, welcome to CalPro's initiative for research-based practices. This is a new initiative of CalPro, and we're funded by the California Department of Education. And the Department of Education uses federal funds to provide CalPro with a contract to provide professional development for the state of California for adult educators. And my name is Amy Park. I'm a research analyst here at CalPro, and I'm the coordinator for the Research-Based Practices Initiative. And this new webinar series, the goal of it is to really engage practitioners and researchers together on the topics that are relevant to adult educators in California. And we wanted to start this first webinar series with Heidi Silver-Pucuela and her information about a symposium that was held in Washington, D.C. And the objectives for this particular webinar is by the end of the session, participants will be able to provide a summary of the symposium and to articulate policies that were discussed among national adult education leaders and to identify findings from reports and studies that are relevant and significant to our learners. And some resources that you probably saw on the registration page, you can also click on them now if you'd like. They're all linked. But the summary of the symposium is available online, and the URL is listed up here in the first bullet. And the paper is called Changing the Odds, Informing Policy with Research on How Adult Learners Succeed. And the second bullet has another resource that has an interview with Heidi Silver-Pucuela, and just to warn you, it's on YouTube. So if your school blocks YouTube, you will need to find another location to watch the video. But it's about 10 minutes, and it's a really good summary of the findings. So you can get to actually see Heidi in the video as well. And also to let you know, because this is a series of webinars with researchers, our next one will be in December, and it's going to address a research study for adult ESL learners, and it's an ESL explicit literacy impact study, and Dr. Larry Condelli will be talking about the study and how it was set up and designed, and it is specifically about adult learners in ESL classes and those who are learning to write and read in English and improve their skills in reading and writing. And programs in California actually participated in the study, so it's very relevant to us as California educators. So for those who want to register, you can click on either of those links and go to the December 7th event to register. And I'll have this slide up at the end so that you can come back to it as well. And so here's a picture of Heidi, our speaker. To also let you know, she recently co-authored a report, and the title of it is below. It's Literacy, Employment, and Youth with Learning Disabilities. And if you'd like a copy of the report, you can download it for free on the Links website. And the website URL is listed there as well. So I've done plenty of talking, and I want to make sure that Heidi gets enough time to present. So Heidi, if you are ready, we'd love to hear from you. So as you're getting ready, I'm going to switch the presentation layout.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a lovely day here, almost done, and hope you're having a good day there also. In honor of today, I wore the same suit, so you know what I'm wearing. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up or raise your hand if you can hear me and the sound is okay. And the good CalPro people will be pushing out the PowerPoint file so you can print it now or save it for printing later if you want it. Looks like there are a lot of raised hands and we're doing okay with sound. Thanks. All right, well, I'm going to talk today about changing the odds, and I'm going to deviate from the symposium that happened over a year ago and share some of the new things that I've been learning and thinking about. But first, I want you to start thinking about some questions, and we will learn together about what might change the odds. So if you could change one policy that impacts low-skilled adults, what would it be? and why. Go ahead and type it into the chat pod, and we'll look at those while I start out by giving you some background on the presentation. This whole idea came about because I attended the Senate testimony in 2009 at which Steve Reeder was talking about the longitudinal study that he's done. And I know he's been on webinars with CalPro, so many of you may know Steve Reeder. Well, at the very end of his testimony, he said something about asking the legislators to change policies that would change the odds for adult learners. And I kind of chased him down afterwards and said, hey, Steve, are you reading Malcolm Gladwell, the Outliers book, which was new at the time? And that's what changing the odds sounded like to me. And indeed, he had. So we started to discuss back and forth about the strategies in Malcolm Gladwell's book and how this might apply to adult ed. Has anybody read Outliers? Raise your hand if you've read Outliers. Quite a few of you. I recommend it just as a very interesting read because it really makes the point that some of the things that we attribute to individual traits and individual talent are really a product of the environment. He opens with hockey players in Canada. The best ones in each age range are usually the oldest kids in that age range, right? So they're more mature, they're taller, they've got longer arms, they're stronger. And it's not a surprise, but it's just not something that we usually think about. So that's how we got started. And we ended up hosting a symposium funded by AIR here in Washington, D.C. About 75 people came. And this is the agenda. It's also published in the back of the report, which lives on the AIR website. So we had 3 panels, and we're just talking about the kinds of policies that we could change that might make a real difference. So I'm going to look at some of your comments, and of course funding is such a big issue for you in California, as well as everywhere, but California, you've really been under the gun there. I also see blended ESL and vocational training, clear standards, child care, funding for materials, more assessments for learning disabilities, interactive software. So these are great ideas, and keep typing if you're typing, and I'm going to show you some of the symposium participants' responses. So integration of services, as you were saying, blending, coordination of transitions between agencies and institutions, not just post-sec, but also other adult service agencies. Leveraging technology, of course, to scale up, reach out, and innovate. Revisions and updates to an accountability system. Everybody wants to update NRS. And facilitating access to education and providing those support services like child care, like college counseling, et cetera, and increasing financial aid. So you're not far off. These are the big issues, and if we all agree on them, can't we get them done is the idea. So as you go through today, here are the questions, and you can be thinking about them too. These are the questions we posted to the participants. What's your vision for adult ed by the year 2015, and what would it take to achieve that? What other entities and agencies should be caring and involved in these issues? And how will we know that we've changed the odds? So these are questions that we posed to table groups at the symposium. And we'll come back to these later this afternoon. This is what the report cover looks like. And we brought together a lot of the data that was shared briefly at the symposium into this document. So thinking about changing the odds, you have to start with thinking about what we mean by a society. Our ladder of opportunity is something that's deeply embedded in the American psyche. We are a land of second chances and a land where you should be able to get access to education. You should have a second chance. You should be able to turn your life around. really believe in this, and yet our ladder of opportunity is broken. There are many broken access points right now, and you see them and I see them. We need to make sure that policymakers also see that the rungs of the ladder are missing or broken, and those rungs can be fixed. One of the things that I'm talking about in this year, one thing that's new for me this year is I've taken on the role of volunteer president for the National Coalition for Literacy. And so I get to have a bit of a statement, I guess, an annual statement. So my statement this year is literacy is a policy lever. We don't need to go looking for other policy levers. There are other policy levers, but we in literacy, in the literacy field, know that literacy is a policy lever. As literacy rates rise in a community or even in an individual, their employment and earnings rise, the poverty levels decrease, you see healthcare improve, both their health status and the cost of care goes down. You see civic engagement increasing. You see voting increasing. The parenting and school involvement and parenting care of children improve. And you see the burden on society go down. So we know this is true. Those of us who work with students every day, we know that their lives improve as they get their GED, as they move up in English proficiency. We know they're able to interact with the school in a more meaningful way with their children. We know that they ask to come back and volunteer. They work in their community. They feel more confident. They ask their doctors better questions. We know that literacy is a policy lever, and we need to make sure that other policymakers know that too. And here's some of the data that we shared. In 1992, in the NALS, you could see that as literacy rates rise, see that going backwards, right, going back into the 3D model, literacy levels are coming forward on the, can you guys see my cursor? This I don't know. You have to tell me in the chat box if you can see my cursor. Okay, so I'm going to talk about it instead of instead of point. I can see tech supports cursor. Okay, so highest credentials are going front to back. Literacy levels are going left to right. But the weeks employed in the past year, you can see them stacked vertically. So changes in individuals' employment and earnings are associated with changes in their literacy levels. So that was 1992, and you can see the same thing in the NAL data in 2003. This phenomenon has not changed, and you wouldn't expect it to change. The lower someone's basic skills, see that on the left, the more likely they are to be unemployed, right? So, and we certainly see that in the recession, that individuals with less educational credentials and less literacy are being laid off first from jobs, and they're having a very hard time getting a replacement job. So the lower your skills, the more likely you are to be unemployed. Here's another one, poverty and its association with education and literacy. In 1992, you can see that people in the deepest poverty are also the ones with the lowest literacy. As you gain literacy and as you gain educational credentials, you come out of poverty. But still, more than 50% of the U.S. population experiences poverty before age 65. So that is a challenge that we're still dealing with. And here you see it in 2003. The percentage of adults in each income range, these are by document literacy levels, and their level of poverty. Now, what about voting? Getting involved in civic education and voting also varies with educational credentials and literacy. This one again is from the Knowles in 1992, and the higher your educational credential and the higher your literacy level, more likely you are to have voted in the past 5 years. So those individuals with the lowest basic skills, the first bar, blue bar on the left, and with no secondary credential are least likely to vote. And again in 2003, the percentage of adult citizens of voting age who voted in the 2000 election are shown here by prose and document literacy levels. And they're not very different, right? The prose and document levels are not very different in many things coming out of the NALL. But the higher your literacy level, the more likely it is that you would go and vote. And you guys in California have a lot of referendums on your ballot that really require some major comprehension skills. And you're posting some good things in the chat box. Thanks, Marion. I'm going to ask a poll now, so get your clicker ready to raise your hand. Have you done voter registration drives and information drives? Are you doing voter information in your programs? Raise your hand if you are. Yeah, some are. Thank you. Because it's not just about voting. There's a lot that you have to learn in order to be an informed voter, and some of the referendums and even some of the major races are difficult to understand if you are not reading at the level that the referendums are written in. So encourage yourself, encourage your colleagues, your teachers, your staff, everybody get out to vote. Next week. It's part of our democratic responsibilities. So let's look at health for a minute. I'm sure you've done health literacy, and I think you had study circles going on health literacy not too long ago. Are you doing any teaching about health literacy in your programs? Go ahead and raise your hand if you are. Somebody put in Easy Voter Guide. Thank you. You can all make use of that. Great. Lots of people are teaching health literacy. And I'm assuming you're teaching it because there's a need among your students for this information. There's a need for all of us, and we're all going to have to get out there and figure out what the new healthcare legislation means to us and try and stay on top of that. But literacy and health status is very related. And one of the shockers that actually got some press out of the NALL when it was first published was health literacy and how many adults, not just with low prose literacy or low quantitative literacy, but many of us have lower than would be expected health literacy. And the medical field has really done a lot of work on this in the last couple years. A lot of papers published, a lot of plain language training guides, a lot of effort on the part of the federal government, CDC, et cetera, to help doctors and healthcare providers use plain language. There was just a conversation going on, well, I guess it's still October, isn't it? October was Health Literacy Month, and there was a conversation going on the Links listserv about health literacy. So if you're part of that network and you've signed up for some of those listservs, go ahead and check that out. Those are very interesting conversations, very important to try and help our students get a handle on what their doctors are telling them and help them ask questions, which is more important. So when you look at the numbers, about 30% of Medicare and Medicaid recipients have low health literacy. So that is a challenge. They're on these programs because they need them, and yet they're not able to really understand everything that's going on in the mail and in their mailings, in the doctor's office, etc. Healthcare costs are much higher for low-skilled adults. those who are not able to take advantage of prevention programs or have a healthy diet. And we also know that environmental factors play into that. Living in urban settings where there aren't grocery stores with fresh fruit nearby. There's a lot of issues going on here. And some of our adults are stuck in the cross-section of many negative indicators for health. And of course, health literacy for older adults is very important. And the more you look at it, the more you know. Our waiting lists aren't decreasing. We've got sources of adults with basic skill needs just churning out new adults, right? These sources are not going away. We've got too many kids still dropping out of high school without the skills they need. We've got a lot of immigration still coming into the country. We need to address Immigration 1.5. I'll talk about that in just a minute. And our aging baby boomers are going to need new literacy skills. A lot of them need some technology help to stay up on things. And even as we age, we know we need to keep active mentally. But even so, some of our elders are going to need some refresher courses. And we've seen a lot of people in the recession coming out of jobs that they were doing great in a job. They'd been there for a while, and now that they're out of that job, whether through early retirement or whatever, they realize they need to upskill and improve their skills before they can get back out there in another job. So this changing economy and this recession is really putting a lot of skill demands on all of us. So who are these new adult learners? We've got underprepared adults and youth. Those without a high school diploma. A shocking number is 1/4 of U.S. youth don't finish high school. So they're out there in the world, often raising families as young adults and working, trying to work. As we said, it's harder for those without a high school diploma to get jobs. We also have some who've come through high school, but they still don't have college-ready skills. 40% of our students nationally enroll into developmental ed. We know that developmental ed does not always deliver the boost that students need. Sometimes they get stuck there, and they're using their tuition money for classes that don't carry credit, and that's discouraging. There's lots of issues about transition there. And new data coming out over the last couple of years is how many students don't start in college. They start in college, they intend to go to college, they register, they get through all of those hurdles, and they don't complete college. They don't stay in to complete it. So that's a new number that's really getting a lot of attention. Over 50% of our college students do not stay in long enough to receive a degree of any kind. And that is just going to have to be addressed if we're going to try and get a whole bunch of new students, young adults, with a degree. They're going to have to stay in long enough to complete it. We also have adults who are not job ready. They lack work experience, or they lack the strong literacy skills and problem-solving habits. You hear employers complain about workers coming to them without the skills and needing on-the-job training there at the workplace. And that on-the-job training is more or less, often less, effective. We used to have a lot of workplace work-embedded literacy programs. Is anyone doing that who's on today? Raise your hand if anybody's doing job-embedded. Christine says she is. Carol Waxman, good. It used to be a much more common, Carol is, much more common delivery mechanism for adult education. There was a much bigger, much stronger workforce development program, and now workplaces are trying to provide that on their own, and they don't always know the best adult pedagogy. Great, and Michelle also. Thank you. Well, some immigration trends. You all are on the front front lines of this, seeing a lot of immigration trends, I know, and you've got most of your students are in ESL. But if we pass nationally comprehensive immigration reform, it could add 6.4 million language learners to our ESL roles. This number is coming out of the Migration Policy Institute, MPI. They're estimating that with some kind of amnesty as was proposed in the comprehensive reform, it would bring 6.4 million adults into the system. Nobody is ready for that, and nobody's prepared to add millions of students to their adult ESL classes. So that is a big challenge. We're just going to have to find different delivery mechanisms to accommodate all these people who want to improve their English. But there are also important subgroups, and I know that many of you know Haida Schruck-Wrigley. She was a Californian and is working with CalPro on several different things. Is back in the state often. She's working and was presenting to us on differentiating instruction to adult ESL students. Different reasons and different backgrounds require different teaching mechanisms and different classroom instructional methods. Those who have limited native literacy, they do not have all the schemata in their brains ready to learn a new literacy. They really need to grow some of that understanding of literacy and how literacy works, or how this alphabet works, jumping down to the last bullet. Those students who come from countries where it's a different alphabet, you've seen them, you've worked with them. They really need to grow an understanding of how our sound system works, how it's represented, how we're putting our ideas onto paper. It's a little bit different than the way they're used to. Also, there are students who come to us who have higher education degrees already, or who have very strong literacy skills, who have work backgrounds. They're ready to go if only they could get the English. And the Welcome Back Centers are a model for that. Now, I know you have Welcome Back Centers in San Francisco. Anybody else know of a Welcome Back Center in your area? Welcome Back Centers help adults who come to the U.S. with a certificate or a degree or a diploma or a license from their home country, try and help them get the English they need and also navigate the certification system here in the United States so they can start working in their field of expertise. Jack is raising his hand. Thank you. That's a different group. There's also this Generation 1.5 group. They are the children of immigrants, and although their oral English may be fine, they often lack the academic literacy that will help them do well in high school and then go on and do well in post-secondary. That sounds like something you've encountered before. Go ahead and raise your hand if you think you're working with Generation 1.5. They can be from anywhere. We've really got to get some curriculum together that will appeal to them and help them because they bring unique needs and they bring unique strengths. So a lot of you are raising your hand. Well, let me go ahead and clear your status and let me ask another poll. All of these important subgroups tell us that we really ought to be differentiating instruction, that adult ESL class should not be everybody who's available on Monday and Wednesday nights and lump all of these different people representing these 4 different bullets in one class. Are you differentiating your ESL classes based on students' background characteristics? Raise your hand if you think that your program is differentiating your adult ESL program based on any of these, any combination, I guess, of these characteristics. Okay, so a couple of you, but not a lot. And that's, when you think about what these people need, it's so very different. And you already know that. It's just that we're all running in place here, trying to keep up. It's so very different to teach someone who's brand new to literacy than it is to be working with someone with an engineering degree from someplace. To put them side by side, yes, they can do some peer tutoring, but it's not really serving either one of them well. So somebody asked me if I could explain Generation 1.5 again. This is kind of an informal term that's coming into being more formal. It represents the millions of youth we have in this country who are children of immigrants or who came as children, who immigrated as children themselves, spent most of their childhood here. They still don't have a really solid English literacy understanding yet. They may have great oral skills, but their written and their academic literacy, understanding how an English literature test or text is different than a science text, that academic literacy is still needing to be boosted. And frankly, they're dropping out in large numbers too. When you differentiate the data on who's dropping out, low-income kids are dropping out in much higher numbers. Hispanic kids are still dropping out in higher numbers. But it's about 11% of Hispanics nationally drop out of high school. But when you differentiate and look a little deeper, it's a much higher rate, like 3 times that for students who immigrated as children. So I know that you all have worked with Nicksol's studies, and you know the persistent study. That's another study circle I heard that went on in California around the state. We cannot take our eye off the ball. We have got to build persistence in our adult learners. And part of building persistence is helping them stay on track whether they are in class or not. And here I'm mixing up Nicksol's longitudinal study and their persistence study. The longitudinal study that Steve Reeder ran emphasizes new data for us that adults who are not in our classes are studying all the time. There's so much self-study going on. So how do we get more information to those people who are not in our classes? How do we reach them? How do we make sure that there's material on the web that they can find and that they can learn from? Not just find, but that really meets their needs for learning. How do we help make that content build their persistence along the way so that it's reinforcing to them? How can we help them see longer-term goals? How do we report those longer-term goals? Not just gaining a level this semester, but long-term, where are you going and how can we help you get there? Develop those learning support systems. I don't know if anybody has seen LearnerWeb, which is what Steve Reeder developed given his findings from the longitudinal support. But those support systems that go with the student and help the student find adult services in the community, get into post-secondary or get a degree, stay on track whether or not he or she is in an adult ed program. We've got to figure out ways to use technology to increase our system capacity because our classrooms are full to bursting and our wait lists are full to bursting. So we can't just take more students. We've got to be doing something to increase capacity in other ways. There are some nice workforce development models. We were talking about that just a minute ago. And I know that CalPro is working on one to combine vocational and ESL training. We need to differentiate instruction that we were just talking about, contextualizing instruction, making sure that people understand that how to put into practice what they're learning in the classroom into their job. That's contextualized. Some long-term basic skill support. We don't want to just hand students off from one place to another, but really bridge and provide additional supports along the way. help build some flexible career pathways so that people can keep working toward a long-term goal but maybe get certificates along the way, and build public-private partnerships with businesses so that we can get more workforce employment and employment education going, get them involved in helping us grow the workforce that they need, etc. And I know you've been working on transition in California. Lots of states around the country are working on transition programs. It's a major focus of the Department of Education, especially Dr. Brenda Dan Messier. She's just very focused on transitioning our students into post-secondary. But we want to transition them effectively, and we want to make sure that they can succeed when they get there. There's no point in sending them if they're going to be one of the 50% that drops out. Some things that have been found to be effective are bridge programs, dual enrollment programs, both from the high school and the college and from the adult ed program and colleges. We want to minimize the need for remedial courses. We should be improving remedial education or developmental education, no doubt about it. But if we could reduce the number of students who need to be in those courses, everyone will be a winner here. And then there's some flexible delivery models that need to be considered, and colleges need the flexibility to offer things that are not based on semesters. Some ideas that were shared by Jonathan Guevara, who is the CEO of the Community College of DC, brand new community college, just getting up and running. This fall they moved into a new building that's all theirs, so they are really excited about that. He was talking about some different ways of offering those early classes, like contextualization and offering them in place, chunking and compressing so that you take the compass scores, for example, that students test in with, and find out which task and which skill students need help with so that you can just teach fractions. If that's all they need, then just do that. And do it at a full-time basis and make it fast and compress it so that students are not dragging on through a whole semester of remedial ed when what they really need is a refresher course on fractions. Or there are lots of models like that, but just to break up that semester thinking. And then blended learning. Now I know that California has been doing a lot of blended learning over the years and having some real success and some real data showing success on that. And at the end of the day, everyone wanted new models and wanted some different demonstration programs, demonstration projects. It says here waivers and demonstration projects. People were asking from the podium of OVE to give us some space to innovate, and that's the challenge. It's hard to keep reporting on the same metrics and innovate. So we need some flexibility there so that we can do learner-centered delivery, reach out to those low-skilled adults, do some case management so that the adults have a mentor or a manager who can understand the whole range of their needs, not just education, but they also need child care, or they also need TANF support, or they also need transportation support, etc. Of course, we need more professional development. Our field needs to professionalize and get more full-time teachers who have planning time, etc. And like I was saying, revising the NRS. People are answering the questions in the chat, so thank you, helping me speak out of my mouth and also my fingers. So that's great. Yeah, blended learning. I'm thinking about online and face-to-face. Since we wrote our report, there have been a couple major reports come out that I would recommend you looking to for data if you're trying to make a data point. College Access for the Working Poor is out of the Institute for Higher Education Policy. You can find that on the web. And the Help Wanted report came out of the Georgetown Center on Education and the Workforce. Very provocative. They have reanalyzed the job creation projections. Reanalyzed it from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and say the BLS is underrepresenting our workforce needs, and they have come up with their own projections. So that is very provocative. Both of those reports are recommended reading. And now that I've been talking all this time, we're ready to talk about some of these questions that I posed to you earlier. So given all that I've shared, the realities of our field and also what experts are calling for in terms of innovation and changes, what's your vision for the adult ed field by the year 2015, and what would it take to achieve? Some of you said funding, funding, funding earlier on as a policy that needs to be changed. Well, how are we going to get there? Type in a few answers, or if somebody's tested their mic, you can raise your hand and we'll pass the mic to you. What's your vision for 2015? Thank you. Sorry, I took myself off lock. Teaching online, getting some universal access to the internet. A PLC, I'm assuming, is a professional learning community. Can I pass the microphone to Andre? Let me try.
I think one of the big visions that I have here and looking at adult ed altogether is us being able to help support the community colleges and creating that bridge. And I don't think I necessarily see that there at this moment. And part of the reasons why, or one of the reasons why that I see that, is because there's still a lot of territorialism, I guess, if you want to call it, where there's a lot of students maybe on a CTE waiting list, and yet the community colleges might not want to be able to hand over some of that, their students, and provide that articulation, so the students aren't doing double the work, taking classes that are adult school, then and to retake the courses there at the community ed. So I think there has to be more give and take, so we can be able to create that bridge, and also to be able to supply whatever resources necessary to the students. Ultimately, that's the goal.
Thank you. It's a great answer. And you're picking up on some of your colleagues here in the chat box. They're talking about having a data system that can facilitate data sharing between systems. It's hard to share students if you're not sharing data. But the dual enrollment is very important, gets students off to a good start. So lots of good comments here coming into the chat box faster than I can read them. But you all can keep reading them too. I'm going to go on to the next question. Who else should be caring about these issues? We care, we adult educators, but who else should be our partners in delivering a good adult education system? Type into the chat box or raise your hand and I'll pass the mic to you. I see community colleges for sure, employers, taxpayers, yes, the general population, right? CalWorks, Folk Rehab, school districts, employers, EDD, I'm not sure I know what that acronym stands for, state legislators and local communities. All of these are great ideas, and when you think about who should be caring, these different organizations, these different communities have vastly different understandings of the problem and different priorities than we do. So we are going to have to change our message and tailor our message so that it can be heard. And thank you, you clarified Employment Development Department. trying to get employers to join us in adult education and help develop our programs is a much different pitch, right? That's going to be a workforce pitch than going to voc rehab or going to a family literacy site, where we want that family literacy site to think about improving family parenting and stuff like that. We've got to have different messages for the different communities. That's not something that we're used to doing. I'm just going to read some more partnerships with employers and delivering training at the place of employment. These are all great ideas. Now, how do we get them to do it? Chambers of Commerce. Wouldn't it be great if we could get the Chamber of Commerce to work with us? Very powerful group. And of course, you have to start in your own community. Go to the Rotary Club and start talking, but you're going to have to tailor your message. It can't be the same message to each community. They won't hear it. Can't hear it. And here's the last question. How will we know that we've changed the odds? Remember, changing the odds is about whole groups of people, not individuals, not one-on-one. We do celebrate when individual students get their GED and pass on into a better job. We celebrate with them, but there's so many more who are hitting barriers. So how will we know that we've changed the odds for people? So go ahead and type in, or I'll pass you the mic if you raise your hand. And the middle class survives, thank you. Literacy rates. Okay, but you know what? We're not doing another national literacy survey into 2016, so we're going to have to find other ways to measure that and to report them. Middle class thrives, thank you. Success stories, thank you notes, absolutely. But we're going to have to see big scale. We're going to have to scale all this up if we've got this big of a problem. We're going to need a very big solution. Less dropouts, thank you. So all good ideas, and think locally and think globally. And your global can be your state because it's so big. But think about your community, and then think about your county, and think about your state. And changing the odds is about policy. And you can't change funding if you don't change policy. So I'm going to just share another couple slides about policy. How do you keep up? It's so hard to keep up. I'm here in Washington, D.C., and I'm always feeling like I'm not keeping up. So here's some advice. Work with your professional organizations. They usually have a policy arm and will report out on policy, and you can keep up that way. The National Coalition for Literacy, as I said, is an organization that I'm putting a lot of volunteer time into this year. We do policy, that's all we do. Policy and advocacy. You'll see us at the COAB conference in the spring, and you can find us on the web. I'm going to share that with you in a second. National Council of Teachers of English, they have a policy. TESOL has a policy arm. I should have put them up here. Sorry about that, TESOL. John Segota from TESOL is the Vice President of National Coalition for Literacy this year, so I should not have forgotten it. The Commission on Adult Basic Ed, COAB, has a policy arm, and your own state professional organization has policy. You can sign up for communications from CDE, it looks like in the web chat. All of these groups will be able to tell you who to contact and when. It often feels like it's, you know, spitting into the wind, excuse the metaphor, but you're sending emails, you're calling your congressperson, and you're not even sure if you're calling before or after the vote, if you're calling in time. And so your policy organizations can help you be effective, be an effective advocate. Here's the NCL page. And you can find this, just Google it, the blog, the advocacy blog for NCL. One of the new things that's happened this year is an adult literacy caucus was formed in the House. It's bipartisan, which is very cool. Dan Maffei and Phil Rowe are the co-chairs. And we now have 18 members of this caucus. Once elections are over, we'll be recruiting more members to join the caucus. And this is really, a caucus is a special interest group, and members are invited to join. And everyone got a Dear Colleague letter, but if your member doesn't remember receiving it, you can find it here. Just scroll down on this page, and the Dear Colleague letter is linked here. We'll ask you to contact your member of Congress and ask them to sign up for the Adult Literacy Caucus and show their support. This is a way that they can show support, and really it doesn't take very much for them to do it. But it gives all of us a larger voice in Washington to help support funding at the federal level and raise their awareness about what's going on at the local level as well. And so what's next? I'm working now to coordinate a policy forum that will happen December 1st. We'll model it a little bit after changing the odds. I'm doing it in cooperation with the Institute for Women's Policy Research, and we're going to focus on low-income women. I don't know that this has been done anywhere. We're trying to collect all the data we can find. We're asking a lot of researchers to run new data reports to see if they could find out what's going on for low-income women in the area that they work in, whether it's poverty or TANF or housing. The GED testing service is going to run a few new reports for us to see how women are faring in test taking and in post-secondary. So it'll be very exciting to get all this data together and find out what's happening for low-income women in our programs and in like-minded programs serving community development. So that's going to be very exciting. December 1st. We're going to have that here in Washington, D.C., and hopefully we will be able to publish a report like we did after changing the odds. So watch for that. We've got a few more minutes here. I want to share the mic out. I'm about done talking. Or hear more from you in the chat. What can you do, and what has this got you thinking about doing in terms of policy and changing the odds?
Great. Thank you so much, Heidi. I wanted to let everybody know that Heidi's been a leader in adult education. She's been volunteering for many events and organizing symposiums, and as well as doing research herself on adult learners. As mentioned before, she co-authored a report on youth with learning disabilities, and that report focuses on literacy as well as employment. And so if you're interested in that, that's something that we could also send out to you as a link. And Heidi is a senior research analyst at American Institutes for Research, and she's also worked with adult learners in the past as well. So she's a wonderful leader and a great resource for all of us. And why don't we just all give her applause? If you could go up to your status bar, and if you'd like to give her an applause, please do so now. And as we're concluding our first adult education research webinar, I wanted to ask you to answer these 3 questions up on your screen. And you can just vote by pressing on the buttons that are relevant to the way you want to answer the questions. And if you have suggestions of future topics for these research webinars, please type that into the chat pod on the right side of your screen. And for those who would like the presentation slides, I did email it to everyone who registered, but you could also download it from this file share in the middle column on the bottom. If you just highlight the very top title, it says Changing the Odds Presentation, and it has Heidi's name. If you highlight that and then press the Save to My Computer button, that will download to your computer. And the second file that's listed there, the AIR Changing the Odds PDF, that is the report that Heidi co-authored related to the symposium findings. So that's another resource for you as well. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar, There is another research webinar that we'll be hosting on December 7th. So if you want to click on the link to the left, that will take you directly to the registration page. And that is for the Adult ESL Explicit Literacy Impact Study. And it'll take a look at interventions that ESL adult teachers use to instruct explicitly to their ESL learners on reading and writing skills. So our next presenter will be talking specifically about that research study. So if you'd like to register, please click on that link. Great, so we've reached our time. It was very short, but yet very sweet. And I really wanted to thank Heidi again for her wonderful ability to multitask presenting and reading the chat pod and being able to summarize many of the findings from the symposium and being able to bring the event from DC to here in California. And feel free to keep typing in the chat pods if you'd like. You can also exit the meeting by going up to meeting at the very upper left-hand corner and just click on the Exit Connect Pro option, and you'll basically end the meeting and exit out. So if anyone would like to use the mic, please feel free to raise your hand and I can pass the mic. But if not, thank you so much for coming to the webinar, and we hope to see you again on December 7th.